In my previous video, I demonstrated how to create an Azure policy and assign it to a specific scope. If you have not watched part 1, please do click on the link above, or alternately, you can click on the link in the description. I highly recommend you watch part 1 and then come back to part 2. In part 1, I have discussed the effects of deny. In this video, I shall discuss the effects of audit if not exists, deploy if not exists, and modify. So here I am on my Azure dashboard and I click on policy. And from the left-hand side, I click on definitions. Over here, I can see a bunch of definitions that have been predefined, built in by Microsoft. I have a few definitions that I have taken for this example. Let's go and create an initiative definition. An initiative definition is nothing but a group of policies bundled into one definition. In my previous video, I showed you a single definition. In this video, I'm going to show you an initiative definition. So let's give it a name. Let's give it an initiative definition. Let's put it in the initiative definition category. Let's say this is my version of 1.0 and this is my initiative definition example, right? Let's click on next. Over here in the policies tab, I will add my policies. So let's add my policy. So let's search for my policy. I have two policies over here, which have audit if not exist effects. So let me search this one. Let me select this one. Let me add another one. Let me add this one. I'm adding 4 policies over here for this example, and deploy if not exists. So over here, I've added 4 policies. Let's look at one policy at a time. Let's go into the definitions tab. What does the first policy state? It states that ensure protection of an Azure virtual machine by enabling Azure Backup. Azure Backup is a secure, cost-effective data protection solution by Azure. If my Azure policy is not enabled for my virtual machine, it will audit it if it doesn't exist. This is my first definition. My second definition is audit that the resource location matches the resource group location. So if my resource is not in the same location as my resource group, it is going to audit my resource group. Inherit tags from subscription, pretty self-explanatory. It will inherit a tag from your subscription tag. And last but not the least, deploy network watcher when your virtual machine, virtual network are created. So if there is no network watcher, it will deploy it if it doesn't exist. That's why the effect is deploy if not exist. So let's move on to the next tab. Over here, I can create a group and assign it to my policy. For this example, let's create a group called virtual machine. Create a new group, okay, and say virtual machine policies and save it. So now I have one group. Let's go back into the policies tab and click on the policy that you want to put in the group. So let's click on the three dots, click on edit groups, select virtual machine and save. Now you can see that this policy belongs to the virtual machine group. Let's do the same thing for the last one as well. Let's go to edit groups, select virtual machine and select save. Click on next. Now you can see that the group virtual machine has two policies. Next, initiative parameter. Let's skip this one for the moment. Click on next. If I had created an initiative parameter over here, I could have specified it over here. But since I haven't created one, I'll just set a basic value, inherit tag from a subscription department. I'm going to inherit any tags from a subscription that have the values department in it. Click next, review and create. So now it says that this initiative has 4 policies in one group. Let's create this. Successfully created my definition. Now let's assign this definition to a scope. So I'm going to assign it to my Azure subscription as a whole. And I'm not going to choose any resource groups at the moment. I'm just going to go with the full subscription. Click next. There are no exclusions. Assignment name is initiative definition. That is fine. As no parameters, which is fine. So now remediation action. I have defined 2 policies. One is inherit a tag from the subscription and one is deploy network watcher when virtual networks are created. Both these effects, modify and deploy if not exist, require a system assigned managed identity or a user assigned managed identity. If either one is not selected, then Azure does not have the permissions to modify your resource, and hence I need to create any one of the 2. So in this case, I will create a system assigned managed identity. But before I do that, I just want to show you something. Let's go into my Azure portal Active Directory. And on the left-hand side, let's click on Enterprise Applications and remove the filters. And let's filter based on recent. So the most recent identity was created on the 14th of September 2022. Today is the 20th of September 2022. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a system assigned managed identity, and we shall refresh this page and you shall see that Azure automatically creates a system assigned identity so that it can modify your resource. So let's go back into my policy tab, create a remediation task, inherit policies to remediate, inherit tag from subscription, or deploy network watcher when virtual networks are created. So these are the 2 assignments that I had selected in my initiative definition. So let's create one for inherit tags, system assigned. Let's put it in US East. The identity will also be given the following permissions: contributor and network contributor, which are required to do this role. Click next. Click next. If I want to have a default non-compliance message, I can have one. Let's just put one, for example, not compliant. Click next and create. So first I created an initiative definition. And once I created that definition with 4 policies, I then had to assign it to a scope. You can assign it to an entire subscription, or you can assign it to your resource or your resource group. In my example, I have done it for the entire subscription. Now, if we go back to the policy homepage, this will show up in a couple of minutes, and it will take around 15 minutes to review all your resources and let you know whether your resources are compliant or not compliant. So I shall pause this video and I shall come back to you when my resources are not compliant. So after about 10 minutes, my initiative definition has taken effect and the current state is non-compliant. So let's click on initiative definition and let's go into policies. And over here, you can see there are 3 policies at the moment that are not compliant. My first policy is deploy network watcher when virtual networks are created. When I created my virtual network, it automatically creates a network watcher. I deleted that network watcher. So what happens now is after a certain amount of time, it looks at my resource and it checks that it is not there, and therefore it is going to deploy if it doesn't exist. And if I see my resource group, I have only one resource group at the moment and no network watcher. So in about 15 minutes, my network watcher will automatically deploy because of my policy. So let's go into my second policy, which is not compliant. Audit resource location matches a resource group location. I have one resource, which is my Vault, which resides in central India, but my resource group is from West US 3. And hence this policy is non-compliant as well. So if I go back to home and if I go back into my virtual machine resource group, you can see that all my resources are in West US 3, but only Key Vault is in central India. Let's select this one and delete this resource. Type in yes and click on delete. So while it deletes, let's go back into my policies. Now let's look at my third non-compliant policy, which is the Azure backup should be enabled for virtual machines. Currently, I have no backups that are enabled for my virtual machines, and hence my state is non-compliant. And this will remain non-compliant because it doesn't have an effect that deploys Azure backup. It's just an audit that when it doesn't exist. So this will stay non-compliant, but these two should be compliant in the next 15 minutes. I'll pause this video and come back to it once it's compliant. So here I am on my Azure policy page, and for some reason my resources are still non-compliant. I waited for 24 hours, but it's still non-compliant. So let's see how we can fix this. Let's go to create remediation task. Let's go to reevaluate resources compliance before remediating. Leave it as all selected locations. So we can just put West US 3, but I'll just leave it as it is and I'll say remediate. And remediation task succeeded. And now I shall pause this video and get back to you once this last evaluated time changes. So after waiting a few minutes, my policy should now be compliant. If I go into initiative definition and click on my policies, I can see that my deploy network watcher when virtual networks are created is now compliant. If I click on this, and if I click on event, I can see that 21 minutes ago, create or update Microsoft policy remediations. This is what we had done 21 minutes ago, and hence it created my resource. There are two things to note over here. The resource initially was not created because I did not have a, a resource group called Network Watcher RG. And if I didn't have this resource group, my resource would not have been deployed. Why is this? So if we click on the policy and if we view the definition, you will see that you need to ensure the existence of a resource group named Network Watcher RG. This resource group should be there. If this resource group is not there, it will not deploy the Network Watcher instance. Second point, if I go into Azure Active Directory and click on Enterprise Applications and remove my filters and sort by created on, I can see that there is one user that is managed by Microsoft. And if I click on that user and go into properties, I can see that this user belongs to the policy assignment. And if I go into the ID once again of 219 towards the end, if I go back into my home page, if I go into my Network Watcher RG and my activity log, I can see that this resource was initiated by my user 219. And hence, my managed user is used to create this resource using my policy. Thank you for watching. And if you do have any feedbacks or comments, please do let me know.